Hi, this is Liz, and today I'm going to be doing a little video talking about Thomas, which is a 12-page comic I did for an anthology that was put together by the comickers group I'm part of called South Bay Comickers. You can find a link to our webpage in the description. Yes, I'll also put a link in the description to Thomas, the comic, so that you can go read it if you have not and you would like to read it before you watch this, which I'm going to be showing the last page. So you may want to read it first. Just a heads up, it's kind of dark, a little bit tragic, so if you're not up for that, then don't read it maybe? Yeah, so on to stuff. So I posted on Patreon and Twitter that I was going to be making this video. So I asked if anyone had any questions or anything they wanted to know about Thomas, and I got a couple questions, which is good. So I'll be answering those questions as well as just going over a few things for myself, basically to help me take a step back from the project and look at it more objectively and figure out what I can do better next time. So, we're going to start off with the process. I had a question that was, how did the idea come to you? And yeah, I made this comic this year, 2016. The initial idea I actually had in 2009. I took a technical theatre class and there was an audio section, and one of the projects was, I think it was basically put together the audio for a scene. And my brain has a tendency to go dark with things, so the initial idea for me was there's a thunderstorm going and you can hear a music box playing, and we hear a creaking door and footsteps, and then there's a gunshot and the music box stops playing. Then the footsteps cross over to where the music box was, the music box starts playing again, and then crosses back over with the footsteps and leaves, and then everything fades out except for the music box. So that was the initial idea, and it was just audio. Yeah, I didn't know what was really going on. I just knew, oh, there's someone else, and someone dies. No, So that was the initial idea. From there, it kind of morphed over the years. That was in 2009, and then I had another class in, I think it was 2012. I took this other class, which was a 3D design class. We had an assignment that was make a magic box, which is just a box with a scene in it and a little, like a peephole through a front door, and you look through it and you see the scene. And so I decided to figure out what this scene was, what was happening in this scene. So I made a little scene, and yeah, the lighting is really kind of bad. So there's a little guy in the corner and there's the guy who's shooting. So this was the second iteration, essentially. And after that I was moving on to other projects, and I kept coming back to this idea. The third time I came back to it was 2013 or 2014, and that one was in storyboard form. So I'm getting closer to the comics. The idea was to make a short film, kind of animated, so I just had some boards laid out because I was trying to get a grip on it. And then I left it for another 2 years, and it came to be what it is now, which is the comic that's in Boom, the anthology for this year from the South Bay Comics group. And this was the one where I really refined the story. I mean, in the third iteration I started thinking about, well, okay, who are these people, what are they doing, and why is someone being shot? So yes, the third iteration was figuring out who everyone was and what was going on, and realizing it was a tragedy. And then this one was basically rewriting it but much tighter, having the pacing actually be effective, and making the backstory much more subtle. In the third iteration, where I actually started thinking about who everyone was, it was much more explicit what was going on. I had a scene where the character, the man you follow with the hat, he looks down at a picture and you see the picture, and it was going to be much more apparent what had happened in the past, who he was, and who this kid was. But in the final one, I decided to push that aside a little bit and just have the main focus the first time you read it through be the action. And then the second time you read it through, if you read it through a second time, you can read it deeper if you want to, but you don't have to, kind of thing. So this time I wrote my tiny little storyboards, which this tends to be what I do for most comics. I'll do tiny ass little storyboards, and then once I'm happy with the pacing and the overall, okay, I know where the beats are, I know what kind of rhythm I'm going for, then I'll start going into full-page versions of those storyboards. If you want to see the storyboards, let me know, and I will scan them in and post them up on Patreon for anyone who would like to look at them. But even in this format, it wasn't finalized. So I had things like this middle panel. I actually asked the South Bay Comics group to read through them and point out any places they were getting confused or any problems they saw with the pacing or anything like that. And this was one of the panels that was pointed out. It's really unapparent that this kid is here. So I adjusted the angle of the camera so that he was more in front, so he was bigger, so it's easier to see him in the final. Then, where's another good one? Oh, I know it's a good one. This middle section gave me such pains. I couldn't figure out how to visually communicate this, and I'm still not certain that it's very well done. I'm still not entirely happy with it. This is the final version, essentially, that I came up with, and I'm still not entirely happy with it, and I think it's as good as I can do right now. Maybe in the future I would be able to look and see, oh, I know exactly how I would do that and communicate it visually and have it be clear. I don't think it's very clear still. But I am working within my limitations and currently trying to push past those and grow. So I think it was a good challenge to have. So after I've done those full sketchbook page storyboards, I went on to the final pages, which are much bigger, and if you go back and look at some of the what I was working on this week videos, where I was working on Thomas, you'll see a lot of Thomas in various stages of completion. There's a lot of pencil sketches, and there's lots of when it was just the outlines in ink, and then various degrees of finishedness. Yeah, and then scanned them in, and I went in on the computer and made the lightning white. There is actually a lightning strike here, which if you go read the comic, then you will see the first page, or even if you just go look at the first page of the comic, you can see that there is a white lightning strike there. For pages like this, it was filling in the outside borders, which I did using Photoshop, because I'm trying to get better at digital stuff. The main problems I ran into with this particular comic was getting stuck in this theatre headspace as far as camera placement. I come from a theatre background. I've not worked in film really, but I've been involved in theatre since I was about 11, I think, and I was doing theatre until I was 21. So 10 years. Yes, I was at school for those 10 years, but that was 10 years where theatre was my primary mode of thinking. That was how I thought about presenting dramatic things, was through theatre. So my camera placement for a lot of the early storyboards was very much in that vein. It looked like the camera was sitting in the audience of a proscenium stage theatre and just looking at the stage as the action happened on that. Whereas it being a comic, you don't actually have that limitation. You can, if you want, have really cinematic angles and create really dramatic things, which I'm trying to get better at. And thank you to the South Bay Comickers for pointing it out when I was really missing opportunities to get really nice camera angles, because I was so stuck in that mindset of sitting in an audience watching a play on a stage. So that was a problem I had, and I think it was something that's good to work on, and I still need to work on it. I need to be aware of it. But I'm glad that I did this comic because it's really kind of brought that to the forefront. So I'm much more aware of that now, and I'm trying to maintain that awareness. The other problems I kind of ran into was how I added tone. You'll notice the first page has such nice markers, yes? I've never really worked with markers before, which is probably a stupid idea to try working with something I'd never used on a project with a deadline, but I don't tend to make the smartest of decisions, apparently. So yes, I did the first page with markers and then added line work on top of it to create further depth and tone. But it took so long, which is probably down to it just being, first off, a large page, and also me tending to be slow with new media. Until I get used to something, I tend to be very slow at it, and even once I'm used to it, I'm slow at working, because I like to get things just so. Not necessarily the healthiest of options. So I moved on to hatching to create tone, like this. And the thing is, I've never actually used hatching to create tone as much as I did in this one. So again, probably a stupid idea to use something I'm not entirely used to for a project with a deadline. But I did it anyway. So yeah, the problem was having to realize while making the first page that doing markers was not going to work. I'm familiar enough with pens that I could get the hatching done pretty much in time, or I was more likely to be able to finish on time using regular pens than I was using markers. Although I did still run out of time. Yeah, which I'm really irritated with myself about because it was entirely my fault. Time management. So having covered the process and some of the problems I ran into on the way, I'm going to now move on to questions about pages and panels. First off being, which page came out closest to how you imagined? And this is kind of difficult to answer because I wasn't going into it thinking I was going to do hatching, and it's been through so many iterations that nothing's really as I had initially imagined it, because it's just the story's changed so much. So yes, but that aside, I think the last page is probably the closest to how I imagined it, particularly in this iteration. And the last page, which I warned you at the top of the video I was going to show, the last page is this one. And from when I started this iteration, this is the closest out of all the pages to how I imagined things turning out. It looks how it looked in my head, pretty much, which is kind of depressing. It's a sad page. Why do I write sad stories? I don't know. But yes, So the last page is the one that turned out the closest to how I actually imagined it in this iteration. Yeah. Although the first page was a very close second. Next question. Did anything come out surprisingly awesome? Yes, actually. Surprisingly, the hatching worked out much better than I thought it would. I mean, I started using it because I knew it would be faster, but I didn't think it would actually end up looking as good as I think it does. And I didn't think it would communicate lighting as well as it does. There's a couple panels where I'm really pleased with how the lighting comes across due to the hatching. I was also kind of surprised at how well using the contour lines turned out, which you can see it mainly on the hat, which I like. In most of the panels, I like how the hat came out, and I used contour lines to create the shape or the feeling that this was a more cylindrical object. And I think it turned out relatively well, better than I expected, certainly. So yes, surprisingly awesome. Next, I'm going to talk about my favorite page or panel, and it's kind of a tie, and it's a tie for two reasons. First off is the first page. I really love the sky on the first page, and it's kind of down to the fact that I just really enjoyed doing the sky on the first page. I don't know if you can see it, but all the little lines in there. Yes, it took a while to do, but it was really fun. I really like getting into detail like that, and I find it enjoyable. So that's one favorite. But then I also really like how the transformation sequence turned out on this page. And I like how the lighting came out, most of all, I think. And I'm not usually great with lighting. So this one also makes my favorites, because I think the lighting came out well, and I liked it. I think it looks good. So now my least favorite page or panel. And there are a couple of things that I'm just not happy with. Most noticeably for me, at least, are these three particular bits. And this is on page 8. I do not like this panel. I really don't. The proportions are completely screwy, the lighting went bad, and the framing is weird. The hat looks okay, but his hand's too small, and it's just bad. I should have reworked that panel. I wish I could rework that panel, because it just doesn't work. So, least favorite panel. Absolutely I don't like it at all. I was also unhappy with the middle three here, which I mentioned earlier. I'm still not certain that they really clearly communicate what's going on. I'm certain there must be a better way of doing it. I just don't know what it is yet. I have to figure that out. So I don't dislike it as much as the other panel where everything is just bad. But it's something I need to work on. And then the top 4 panels on page 11, because it is just, I ran out of time, basically. And it makes me really sad. I'm just genuinely upset that no. There's no backgrounds. It's upsetting. But yes, my least favorites. So let's move on to what I learned. Yeah, let's move on to what I learned. I learned to maybe not try a new technique on a project that has a deadline. Just doesn't generally come out right. I also learned that I need to pay attention to where the camera is, and if I'm getting stuck into a theatrical frame, rather than being aware of or taking advantage of more cinematic angles to create drama and make things look interesting. I also need to watch my proportions when I'm drawing people. Yes, I need to draw more anatomically correct figures until I can get my proportions down better. Also, panel layout. I struggled a lot with this one, with the panels. I still can't get my brain out of framing everything in squares and rectangles. And there's a couple of diagonals, there's an inset that's parallelogram, but overall, I tend to have very gridded panel layouts. And I'd like to start using more dynamic panel layouts, which means not putting everything in squares or rectangles. It's something to work on, and I think I'm more aware of it now, so that's good. So yes, things I learned. Time management is also good, and yeah, that's pretty much what I learned. Also, I need to be better at separating myself from the project. I ran into a lot of problems doing the initial line work in pencil and in pen, because I was having to act through the scenes, and I was getting too close to the material, and it was really kind of bringing me down. I was getting very unhappy, because it's a tragedy, and I was acting out this situation where a guy has to kill a kid, and that's not a fun thing to do. So, I mean, it's fun. It's an interesting acting challenge, but to have to go through these motions repeatedly, trying to get into this character's head day after day after day for weeks in order to draw it, and then having to spend time with these images, going over them in inking, then erasing the pencil lines, going over them again, and then doing the hatching. I needed to be better at managing my time so I could spend time away from this comic. And I didn't do that well. But now I know. Another thing I've learned. Bonus knowledge. So yes, if you have any other questions about Thomas or my process or anything I'm working on now, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you. Thank you for watching. You've been wonderful. And yeah, I'll see you later. Bye.